Hey there, Pastor Marc here. It's our prayer that this message would encourage and equip you in your relationship with Jesus. We're able to provide this content due to the joyful generosity of our financial partners. And if you'd be willing to join that tribe and help get some sermons like this around the world, you can donate at harvestbaptist.info/give. God bless. We're going to continue our conversation on the Spirit of God, and we're going to look at a facet of our life that needs to be addressed because it is a very real facet of our life, and that is the topic of pain and suffering. I was thinking recently, just kind of as I studied this week, I turned 37 last month, and so I'm no longer my mid-30s. I could classify mid-30s, and now I feel like it's late 30s. And there's pros and cons of being 37. So the pro is that I can shave my beard and not be mistaken for the youth pastor any longer, probably. For many years, everyone has their cup to bear. This one's mine. For many years, especially when I didn't have a beard, people constantly thought that I was the youth pastor. So I'd preach and they'd come, after Sunday and, hey, that was a great sermon. When's the senior pastor going to be back in town? This is it. This is what you get. Missionaries would come in and you meet them. And I always tell people, hey, I'm Pastor Marc. I'm one of the pastors. I want to tell people because it's true. That's how I view myself. And the missionary would be like, great, what do you do? Do you work with the teenagers or those sorts of things? And so I can probably get away with I'm close enough to 40, maybe you're old enough for this job now. The con is that your body does start to change. I know I'm at the very beginning of it, and I have nothing to complain about. Some of you are like, listen, you just wait, pal. But it started to happen, right? There's some lower back pain. Some heartburn, that's kind of a new thing that didn't used to happen. A little bit of moodiness, weight gain, water retention or something, I don't know. It's happening. And I've begun to ask myself, am I pregnant? That might be what's happening here. And shocker, I'm not. I don't know if you believe that or not. I listened to a little TikTok influencer. They had a video. They told me I could be a woman and I could get pregnant. But my spidey senses told me that they were lying or crazy or something, and that's not true. So I haven't been pregnant yet. I don't think I will be. But my wife has been on a handful of occasions. I've lived with a pregnant woman. I know what that's like. And I've learned with pregnancy that the real terror of pregnancy is not actually the first trimester or the second trimester or the third trimester. It's actually the labor and delivery part, right? That's not to de-emphasize or say that the first or I hear that the second's all right, but the first or third are not bad. Cassandra's down here, third trimester, let's go. Healthy mama, healthy baby, we're rooting for it. Labor and delivery is really the excruciating part, right? Where the back pain won't kill you. It may feel like it's going to kill you, but it won't. But labor and delivery could. And thank God for the common grace of medicine, because now we do have ultrasounds and tests and heart rate monitors we can put on the baby, a C-section if needed, and epidurals. Thank God for epidurals. Any ladies got a witness on an epidural? Any dads get an epidural while you were in the room with them? The legal drug dealer, those are nice. So we're grateful for all that. But labor and delivery is something that is excruciating. It's terrible. It's awful. It's painful. But it gives way to something that is beautiful and glorious and life-giving in the truest sense of the phrase. And that kind of picture of labor and delivery leading to something glorious and life-giving is really the idea behind this little snippet of Romans chapter number 8. And what this section of the Bible tells you is that creation and we as humans, as Christians, are in this sort of labor and delivery, painful, excruciating process that we refer to as life. But there is something on the horizon that will give way to that is glorious and beautiful and life in its truest sense. And I want to use that as a window into helping us understand the pain that really is labor and delivery right now, but also the glory that is to come, and what the Spirit of God has to do with all of that. So let's read together, if we might, Romans 8. Let's start in verse number 17. We covered the first half of this verse last week. It says that if we are children, then heirs, heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ. And man, that is good news. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. Now, if you're in the habit of underlining or circling words in your Bible, I want you to underline or circle a select few words as we move through this. In verse 17, there's the word suffer. Verse 18, I reckon that the sufferings, and there's another word, sufferings, of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who has subjected the same in hope. More to come on what that means in a minute. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of, and here's a word, corruption, into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation, and here's three words in a row, groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. And not only they, but ourselves also. We, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, we Christians, even we, here's a word to circle, we groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. For we're saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, what doth he hope for it? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. Likewise, the Spirit also helpeth our, and here's a word, infirmities. For we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit itself makes intercession for us with, and here's a word, groanings, which cannot be uttered. And he that searches the hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that all things work together for good, to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Now that last verse is the verse that we probably know from this text. It's the one we put on our t-shirts and in our picture frames and on our coffee mugs. But it is nestled in a context. And that context is the words, if you circled them, were suffer, suffering, corruption, groaning, travail, pain, groan, infirmities. There are three simple points I want to give you, and then a few practical takeaways. And the points are the groaning of creation, the groaning of Christians, and then the groaning of Christ. Now, before we get to the groaning of these categories, let us first define the word groan or groaning. It says very plainly, creation groans. We groan. The Spirit groans with us in prayer. But what do we mean groan? Well, we mean the cry or the moans of someone who is facing death. Or perhaps you feel like you're dying. Groaning is what happens when you have a kidney stone that is beginning to be passed. This happened to me for the first time a couple months ago. And thank God for Pete Cardamone, my neighbor and deacon at the church, who picked me up and took me to the hospital at midnight and sat there and listened to me groan away. Groaning. Groaning is what happens when you are in labor and delivery. And the groaning becomes more intense and more frequent as the contractions become more intense and more frequent. Groaning is what happens on a battlefield after all of the fire has ended. No more firing of the weapons, no more noise. They say in the Civil War that the worst part of the Civil War was after the gunfire had ceased and the smoke had cleared, you could just hear, almost like crickets chirping, the groaning of men whose life was literally ebbing out of them, and they knew it. All of these groans at one time of men on a battlefield dying. That groan was something that was haunting. It was eerie. This says, the text says, that creation groans, verse 22. Right before that, it tells us why. It says that creation groans because of us. Now, we could all look at creation and understand that, some things are wrong. Like it doesn't feel right. It feels unfitting that there's tsunamis and earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes and catastrophes and landslides and all these things. We look at that and say, well, what's the deal? And the Christian answer to that is we messed up. And because we messed up, now creation is messed up. That God created and everything was good. Everything was very good. That pain, death, disease, suffering, those things were not part of the original plan, but we rebel, we turn away from God, and in so doing, not only do we become cursed, but the ground itself becomes cursed, and now creation groans. We would all recognize that our world, just our natural world around us, is beautiful and there are immensities to enjoy, but there's also something wrong. So we go to the ocean and we look at it and we have this beautiful beach and we say, how awesome and how wonderful, I love this place. But it's the same ocean that's a hurricane's going to roll in and come out of those waves onto the shore, and you go in the waters and a shark could bite you. Well, is the ocean wonderful or a shark's going to bite you? Both. We look at the sunset and we say, beautiful, but that same sun will burn you and give you skin cancer. Is it beautiful or does it hurt you? Both. There is something beautiful about the world God has designed. We can see that, but we also see that there's something fundamentally broken. That the redwood forest is amazing. I've been there. It's awesome. But trees also crack and break and fall on cars and houses and people and kill them and obliterate things. That is the world that we live in. But verse 19 tells us that all of this created order, beautiful yet broken and groaning, is waiting for something. That it is going through a labor and a delivery process of sorts, and it is waiting according to verse 19, eagerly awaiting. The earnest expectation is what it says. Creation is on its tippy toes. It's on the edge of its seat, waiting to be made new, waiting to be set right, waiting to be no longer broken, waiting to no longer groan. Waiting. Yes, trees creak and wolves howl and the wind screams when it blows, but waiting for that to be made right. But something has to happen first. In the same way that we messed up, so it was messed up, there is an order, a sequence of events. We will be made right. It's waiting for the glorification of us. It's waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. It's waiting for us to be made right, so then it will be made right. And it's anticipating this, waiting for it. In the same way that in Beauty and the beast was cursed, and so his whole habitat is cursed. The mansion and the servants and the guests. But when the beast is made right again, so the teacup is made right, and the piano is made right, and the clock is made right, and everything is made right. So too, when we are glorified, when we are made right, then all that surrounds us will also be made right, is what it's saying. And creation, until then, groans and waits for that. Now, there's massive implications here. There's just the plain, straightforward truth of what's wrong with our creative order. The Bible gives an answer to that. The problem is actually sin. But there's also implications for what do we do as Christians, like with environmentalism. Like, what do we do? Well, the Bible is very balanced, very nuanced. It depends on how you would define an environmentalist, but if you would use just a very loose definition of an environmentalist, it's perhaps someone whose greatest fears lie in what will happen to our environment and will we run out of resources, and whose greatest hopes lie in restoring the environment and caring for the environment and caring for our planet. If that is at least how I would define an environmentalist, then Christians are not environmentalists in that sense. Our greatest fears do not lie in our habitat or in our creative order, and our greatest hopes do not lie in creation itself. That's not us. But on the other side of the coin, We are entrusted by God to steward and to care for the creative order that he not only designed and we messed up, but one that he will set right one day, and we are to care for that and to steward it well. We are to not purposefully pollute or corrupt things. We are to do our best to use our resources wisely. We are to do our best to care, to be good stewards. In the same way that you have a body that is broken, one that is decaying. Even if you don't feel it yet, if you're a teenager, today's teen integration day, or you're in your 20s, you may not feel like it yet, but even in your 20s, you wear cosmetics. Why? Because the sheen that you once had as an infant is no longer there, and you're trying to compensate for it. Your stem cells are at their best from the umbilical cord. Every year, they get worse. They do. But because we say, okay, our body is decaying, it's broken, it's affected by sin, and God will make it right one day. So we just throw our hands up and not care for our bodies in the meantime? No. We still would go to the doctor. We still would want to set a broken arm. We still would want to care for our bodies and try to prolong our health. Well, the same logic applies to creation. Yes, it is broken. Yes, it is decaying. Yes, it is groaning. And yes, God will set it right one day. But in the meantime, we steward it well and we treat it well. You say, well, what does this mean? Does this mean that I should recycle or not recycle? I don't know that it speaks into that specifically. You can make that decision on your own. The Bible's not legalistic in that sense. But we do have this balance when it comes to creation of understanding that our hopes and fears are not permanently affixed to creation, they're to a creator. But at the same time, we steward it well. But really the true, I think, teeth of the text lies not in the reality that creation groans and waits for something, but it begins to parallel it and say that, well, so do we. We groan, but we wait for something. Here's what it says. I'll read it to you in verse number 22. We know the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. And not only they or it, but ourselves also. And then it says this, don't miss this phrase, which have the first fruits of the Spirit. So this is specifically now talking about Christians. And it's going to begin to debunk the myth that if I'm a Christian, then I escape groaning. If I'm a Christian, I escape pain. If I'm a Christian, then I don't have disease. I don't have sickness. I don't have problems. I don't have poverty. I don't have issues. It begins to really poke holes in the health, wealth, and prosperity movement that if you're a Christian, then everything's just going to be honky-dory and you'll have no issues and everything will just be a bed of roses. It begins to say, we who have the Spirit, we ourselves groan within ourselves. We groan too. We hurt too. So this is a beautiful text. On the one hand, it tells you that there's a ton of hope. Verse 17, we'll be glorified with Jesus. Verse 18, glory will be revealed in us. Verse number 19, manifestation of the sons of God. Verse 21, glorious liberty of the children of God. Verse 23, we're waiting for the redemption of our body. Verse 24 and 25, we have hope and we patiently wait for this hope. Unbelievably rich good news. The choir just sang about it. That song that was Gloria, 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 or Glory, Glory, Glory. There was a line in that song that they sang. They said, the broken, they are no longer broken, as they danced before him a radiant debut. What are they singing about? They're singing about this. No longer being broken, no longer being messed up. The glory that is to be revealed in us, Gloria. That's what they're singing about. Incredibly hopeful, incredibly rich, incredibly good news. But it also says, in the meantime, we're hoping, we're waiting, we need patience because the words are suffering, groaning, travail, pain, infirmities. What realism. But this tells you there's tremendous hope, but there's also tremendous pain. Both are true. It's interesting, and I don't want to get too nerdy on you, but if you'll indulge me for a minute, and I can take you to maybe Religion 101. In the first century, part of the apologetic for Christianity, part of what made it appealing to the world around it, is that Christians had resources for suffering and pain that other people did not have. They had a very unique approach to the pain and the freight of life that the world around them had not seen before. You really then and now don't have that many options for how you're going to approach pain and suffering, because we all understand that it's there. There is a way to approach pain and suffering that's kind of a karmic way. There's a lot of different iterations of religions that are karmic and would embrace karma, but the basic idea is if you suffer, it's because of you. You did something wrong, so now you're going to pay the price for it. This is something that is very overt and sometimes covert. You would find that even the idea of karma covertly works its way into Judaism, into Christianity many times, and people begin to play this game. So you would find an example of this, say, in the life of Job, where Job's friends can't come up with any other reason than all the suffering that Job is going through, other than you must have dropped the ball and you must have done something wrong, Job. Well, that's very karmic. You would find this in Jesus' day, where they come to him and they have this young man. He's been born blind and blind his whole life. And they say, Jesus, two options. Who sinned? This man or his parents? Now, what is that? That's karma. That is, this suffering has to be because somebody messed up. And karma does away with injustice. It makes everything neat and fair, and you're suffering because of something that you did. It may not be in this life, maybe it was in a previous life, and that's where reincarnation and all these sorts of things spin off from, but it's suffering is your fault. Then you have not karma, but you have kind of Eastern religions. And Eastern religions, Buddhism, things like that, basically say suffering is an illusion. If you really understood it, and if you just changed your perspective and your paradigm, and you understood how when you lose something and you lost that your mom or your dad or that love or your health, you're not really losing anything, and everything is connected. And what they say is suffering's an illusion. It's not real. You just have to be enlightened, and once you're enlightened, then you will understand that suffering is not real, and you'll be okay with anything that comes your way. Then you have, kind of in Paul's day, the Roman day, he's writing to Roman people in the first century. There was just this Greco-Roman set of philosophies that existed, but the most prominent one would have been Stoicism. You may know someone who's Stoic, and you refer to that as their personality, and that they're very reserved or maybe contemplative and shut down or don't show a lot of emotion. But Stoicism at its root was very affixed to suffering. Stoicism said that the best and most noble virtue was your ability to control yourself. So when suffering comes your way and pain comes your way, don't flinch. If you cry, you're weak. If you groan, you're weak. If you moan about it and you ache, that's a problem, and you need to grow some virtue and some character. You need to be metal. You need to be calm and composed and be able to take anything that life throws your way without flinching. Those have all been in existence for a long time to one degree or the other. Nowadays, there's kind of a new way of approaching suffering, which is probably the worst, but it's what our culture embraces, which is a very Western, a modern way of looking at suffering. And that's the idea that we do suffer, but there's really no hope for the future. Our culture looks and says, especially those that are secular, there's no afterlife, there's nothing after this, you got this life, YOLO, you live once. So, if you only live once, and it will also say, suffering is around the corner. Our modern society will say, you're gonna die. Anything that brings you happiness and joy is gonna be taken from you. They are gonna be taken from you, you are gonna be taken from them, your health is gonna be taken from you, it's all going away. And there's nothing better after it. That's the worst. So, because of that paradigm, right now, get as much pleasure and as much happiness and as much comfort as you possibly can. And when you understand our culture through the lens of suffering, it will make sense of why we are so comfort addicted why we have to have more and more and more comfort. Doctors who are American doctors who have gone overseas and practiced medicine in third world countries, most all of them will tell you, it's shocking to me. I see people in third world countries who are worse off, they have worse ailments, and they have less comfortable solutions to be able to cope with their ailments, but they're able to handle the suffering better than American people can. Because we understand it as, I have a very limited amount of time to be comfortable and to have happiness and pleasure, and then it's going away and there's nothing after it, so I better get all that I can and hang on to as long as I can. So now we're comfort addicted. This is not to say any of these things are wrong, but this is why every little niche of our society is, you can make money if you can just make things slightly more comfortable. A little more padding, a little more ergonomic, a little more comfortable, right? We don't sleep on the ground anymore. We have a mattress. No, we don't have a mattress. We have a mattress and a box spring. We don't have a mattress and a box spring. We have a mattress, a box spring, and a pillow. Oh, not just a pillow. We have sheets. Not just sheets. We have silk sheets. We have Egyptian cotton sheets. We don't just now have a bed, a mattress, a box spring, and a pillow. We have a split king. We have two twin beds next to each other, and you can choose your number, and I can choose my number. And now we have cooling mattresses, so you can choose your temperature and my temperature, and I choose my number, and you choose your number, and I get zero gravity, and you lay flat, and we keep more comfortable. And that's, if you have a zero gravity, split king, you crazy, mattress bed that cost you thousands of dollars, I don't have a problem with it. The point is that that's one little microcosm into our society at large, that we have to be as comfortable as possible and avoid pain as long as possible. And we know pain is coming, so don't think about it. Do not dare put your brain in that space for the future. Avoid that. Compartmentalize that. This is why COVID messed us up as a society. Everyone's like, we're more depressed and anxious and crazy and panic attack left and right than ever before. It's off the roof. Well, nah, duh. If we want to blame it on kids weren't in school and our cell phones and stuff, maybe that contributed to it. But I think it's just as simple as this. No one wants to look at their own mortality in the face and the pain and suffering that could be, and this little virus all of a sudden made everybody look their own morbidity in the face, and all of a sudden it scared everybody half to death, and it caused a lot of consternation, because what our Western secular society has to offer for that is nothing. There is no comfort. There's nothing. Christianity opposes all of them in its own way and offers something that's so unique. To those that are karmic, Christianity says, no, there is such a thing as injustice. That kid was not blind because of his sin or his parents' sin. Jesus pretty much told him, shut up. That's not true. This was actually for the glory of God. Neither of your options are right. Stop that. There is such a thing as injustice. To the Eastern religions, Christianity says, no, pain is real. Don't tell me it's an illusion. Don't tell me I need to reframe it. Don't tell me I need a new paradigm. My pain is real and it's valid. To the Stoics and the philosophers and those that just want to be contemplative all the time, it says groan. Sometimes life stinks. Sometimes it hurts. Like it punches you in your soul. And we groan and we cry and we ache in those moments. Don't tell me that I just have to keep a stiff upper lip and not snivel and never cry. That's not true. But to our Western society, it says you don't have to be addicted to comfort right now. Not only is it don't think about the future, Christianity says think about the future. Like really think long and hard about the future, because there's a glory to come, and you don't find your fear and your anxiety there, you find your hope there. So it's this very unique perspective, all right? I'm done with class now, and we can re-engage, and we can be a little less intellectual. Here's the basic point. Life is hard sometimes. This acknowledges that. It acknowledges that there's something beautiful to come, but it also acknowledges that life is hard. There's groaning and pain and suffering and infirmity. We might even say it like that's not fair. Sometimes your spouse up and leaves you and saddles you with a divorce. You didn't ask for it. You didn't want it. You probably didn't even deserve it. But there you are. And it hurts. You feel embarrassed, you feel shame, you feel pain, you feel all kinds of stuff. That's not fun. Sometimes the car accident happens, or whatever accident happens, and you lose mom, you lose dad, you lose your brother, you lose your sister, you lose your best friend. And guess what? That hurts. You groan. You ache. You have pain because of that. Sometimes they get to have a baby when you've been wanting one for so long. And while you are happy for them, you're also very hurt for you because it hurts. What are we talking about? We're talking about life. Life. You can't live for very long and escape this reality. Sometimes it had nothing to do with what you did, but they did something to you. And they hurt you. And they got away with it. And what this text says is what we all know, that the sinner doesn't hold. That things are in a state of decay. Second law of thermodynamics is right. That our creation is groaning. That we, even in our bodies, are aching and aging. That we have physical pain, we have emotional pain, we have relational pain. It's crazy sometimes that, creation works against you and groans. So you know, I'm going to work my garden, I'm going to water it, I'm going to fertilize it, I'm going to do my best to pull the weeds, and then all of a sudden, your tomato gets blossom end rot. And that's frustrating. But you know what's more frustrating than that? When you work and cultivate and water and fertilize a relationship, and the relationship gets blossom end rot. It's maddening. And it brings you to the point of tears and frustration and bitterness and hard. It's talking about the reality of life, that sometimes you just hurt. I don't know if I got most of my tears out in the first service or not, but this last 6 months for my wife and I has been just a new season of pain. We had known some pain, but never not this much. And there are days where it's a new experience to go to bed crying together and wake up at 3 a.m. and cry together. To go back to sleep and wake up again and cry a little bit more. That stinks. It just stinks. It hurts. Christianity says don't cliche that away. Every cloud has a silver lining. Oh, God, he closed the door, but he opened a window. With the utmost respect in the world, shut up. For real. I know that those things are well-intentioned, but sometimes it does a disservice to the groaning of life that you just hurt. Christians are good at twisting and even weaponizing the Bible sometimes. Well, didn't we sing this morning, rejoice in the Lord, always rejoice, right? That was our song. The fruit of the Spirit is joy. So we're just supposed to have spirit fingers and there's no pain. We just act like nothing hurts. No. You can't just rip those verses exclusively out of context and ignore the rest of the Bible. We have a whole book called Lamentations, inspired by God, where someone is lamenting. Ever read the Psalms? The Bible's so balanced. It tells us that we don't sorrow as those that have no hope. So what it means is we do sorrow. We just sorrow in a different way. We have hope with it. We have sorrow and hope. Even in laughter, the heart is heavy. We have laughter and we have heaviness at the same time. Even verse 28, all things work together for good. And we love to be like, oh, great. Well, it says all things. You know what all things means? It means all things could happen to you. Nothing's off the table. They could die. They could get sick. You could die. You could get sick. You could be broke. The business could go upside down. All things can happen to you. Right? You got to tip your hat to that. That's not the best news in the world. What it's saying is we have these moments, many moments in life where we groan and we ache, just like creation does. But just like creation, we have a hope. We have something that we look forward to, something that we put our sights on. It's not just soul-crushing pain all the time, but there is more to it than that. But don't ever trivialize the pain away. I think one of the best examples of this is Jesus with Lazarus. Jesus knows that Lazarus is not only going to die, but then he's dead, right? And Jesus knows in about 6 seconds I'm about to raise this dude from the dead. Like all the tears are going to be gone and everybody's going to dance and everybody's going to be happy because he knows this is coming. He knows he's going to do it. So what does he do to the people, Mary and Martha and the people that are there and they're wailing and they're crying and they're hurting? What does he do? Hey, cheer up, people. It's all going to be good in just a little bit. No, he weeps. He weeps with them. And then he brings them joy. And what the text says is in the same way that Jesus wept with that audience and then brought them joy, God still does that with us today. And it begins to talk about the groaning of Christ and his Spirit. Here's what it says. I want us to read it together. Verse 26 and 27. First it says that the Spirit groans with us, but then it also at least implies, if not overtly says, that Jesus groaned for us. Verse 26 and 27. Likewise, the Spirit also helpeth our infirmities. Well, how does he help us? Well, we know not what we should pray for as we ought. So the Spirit itself, it makes intercession for us with, and here's the word, groanings, which cannot be uttered. He that searches the heart knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for saints according to the will of God. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know all that means. I don't know that anybody knows all that means. You read 10 theologians, you'll get 10 different answers on some of the intricacies of that text. But I do know what it doesn't mean, and I do know something for sure it does mean. I know it doesn't have anything to do with tongues. There's a lot of people that look at this like the Spirit and groanings, it's talking about speaking in tongues. There's a lot of verses on speaking in tongues you can look at. This isn't one of them. What I do know it says is that just like creation groans and we groan, the Spirit groans with us. What it's saying is, in the same way that you as a parent hurt when your child hurts, and you're in pain when they're in pain, and you groan when they groan, that God himself groans with us. That he hurts when we hurt. That he's in the pain with us. That he's there feeling our infirmities. And how exactly does all that work? And how exactly does he begin to pray for that when we don't even have the words to pray sometimes? And our prayers are as simple as, God, and that's all you got. You can't even utter the words. In those moments, he is there and he feels your heartache. You say, how can I know that he feels my heart? How can I know that he feels my pain? It's not just this promise that we know just because it says so. There's a proof. And the proof is because Christ groaned for us. The Spirit groans with us because Christ groaned for us. And the very beginning of the text said that we are the sons of God and we have an inheritance and we have all this glory if we suffer with Jesus. The idea is that Jesus suffered. The idea is that almost in the same way that God looked down on the children of Israel who were in Egypt, and he says, according to Exodus, that he heard their cries and he heard their groans. And he decided to do something about it and to redeem them and to deliver them. In the same way, God looked down on humanity and even creation itself, groaning and in pain, and said, I want to do something about this. I want to get involved with this problem. I'm going to come. My son will become man, will put on flesh, and he will live. He will be hungry. He will be hurt. People will betray him. He will know what it's like for his parents to think that he's crazy. He will go through pain. He will die on a cross, and he will suffer. And there he will groan. He will cry out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? He quotes Psalm 22. That's actually the first part of that verse. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? The end of Psalm chapter number 22, the last part of that verse says, why are you so far from helping me? And from the words of my roaring, or some translations say, from the words of my groaning. The idea is that we can rest assured that God is not indifferent to our problems or pain. That he does come and feel it with us and help us with it. How do we know this? Because he groaned for us to redeem us, to give us a hope in the future. And you put it all together, and what it says is we can look back and see that Jesus groaned for us, and we can look in the moment and see the Spirit groans with us, and we can look forward to a hope that is one day coming, and he will make all of the wrongs right. And we can put all of that together, past, present, and future, and it gives us enough resources to be able to handle suffering different. It doesn't take away the problem of pain. It doesn't ignore the pain. It doesn't say that there is no pain, but it does say there's something for your pain that other people who don't know Jesus don't have. There's something in the Spirit of God that we now get to enjoy to help us with this problem of pain. I love, not to keep alluding to the songs that we sang, but our last congregational this morning, there was two lines back to back that said, he will die, our burden bearing, and he will live, our sorrow sharing. That's the idea. He dies groaning for us, and he lives groaning with us. That's Romans 8. Now the takeaways from all of this for a Christian, it's not that I have all the answers for your pain or my pain. I don't have all the whys. Does it say that he will turn it all to good? Kind of. It doesn't say that it'll take a bad thing and the bad thing will now be a good thing. It doesn't say that. There are bad things that are bad things. Murder's bad. End of sentence. Abuse is bad. Death is bad. It's not that bad thing ceases to be bad. No, it's still bad. But God can take those bad things and somehow bring some good out of them. Not only can he will. But maybe not today. We love to put God on a clock. You got a week. Start. Not always a week. Not always a year. Not always this life. It could be like the glory to come. But the point is that we as Christians can reckon some things. We can reach to God. And we can rest. Those are the takeaways. I got 90 seconds on each. Reckon, reach, rest. Verse 18, where we started the text, said, I reckon. Say, I reckon. Was Paul a Texan? I reckon. Well, it's an accounting word. It's not a southern drawl word. It's actually an accounting word. I add up. I think long and hard. I calculate. I calculate what? Well, I calculate what is to come. What Paul is saying is, I think long and hard about the glory that is. He is giving you actually an antidote for so much of your suffering. It's so easy when you're in the middle of soul-crushing pain to only think about your pain. But it's so unhealthy. The Bible never says ignore that, act like it doesn't exist. You shouldn't you shouldn't look at that. That's a very old Stoic way of things. The modern way is look only at that and bow to it and become fixated on it. The Bible is way more balanced than that. It says, yes, acknowledge it, groan, have pain for sure, but also look at the glory that is to come. You need moments where you take your eyes off of you and your pain and you begin to look ahead to the future, to the promises of God, to Jesus himself. You begin to realize that, you know what? God will take the bad things and somehow work some good out of them. But whatever good I have, that's not going to be taken away from me in Jesus. But you know what? The best is yet to come. You begin to reckon those things. You also keep reaching. God is your Father. That was the whole point. Before the text we read, remember that last week? It was all about God being your Father. And like a little child with intelligent trust, reaching out and saying, Abba, Father, Daddy. You keep reaching out to God and saying, I trust that you're my Father. I don't know all that you're doing in my life. I don't know why you're allowing this. I don't know why you're not taking this away. But I do know you're not indifferent. You proved that at the cross. You suffered for me. You groaned for me. I know you're here with me, and I'm gonna keep reaching out to you. I'm not going to push you off to the side. But then you keep resting. You keep resting that God is somehow going to bring good out of it. Not that you silver line everything, but you realize, you know what? God does have a plan. Elizabeth Elliot is someone who went through a lot of pain and suffering. Her husband, Jim Elliot, was one of the 5 missionaries who was speared to death by the Auca Indians. The night before they were speared to death, they had a devotional, and they sang, if memory serves me right, God, our shield and our defender. And then they went out with God as their shield and defender and got speared to death. And Elizabeth Elliot has a lot of books and a lot of sermonettes, so to speak, that she's given, a lot of public speaking. But she continually beats this drum. She makes one, I think, very profound argument. If God is big enough to deliver us from whatever problem it is, and we're crying out, we're saying, stop it, change it, stop it, change it. If he's that big and that strong, then he's also probably very intelligent. If he's super strong, he's probably also super intelligent. He has a wisdom we don't have. And if he has the power to change it, and our prayers indicate as much, then he also has the wisdom to know if he should or not, even if it doesn't make sense to us. And she has a very logical point. It doesn't always help with the emotional pain, but it does add up. That I can keep resting and keep knowing that he does work all things together for good. That he does have a plan. I don't know what it is all the time. I may not understand it all the time. But I keep reckoning, I keep reaching, I keep resting.